My name's Riley Donahoe. I'm a political science major. I chose to do my presentation on rebuilding Japan's military. I chose this topic because I find it interesting how Japan is going from it being a pacifist country with more of a defensive military to one with more offensive capabilities. We haven't seen Japan with military like that since the end of World War II, so I chose that as my topic. So prior to 1868, Japan was ruled by the shogun, who was a military dictator, and he was also the leader of the aristocratic warrior class, many people know as the samurai. So under his control, he had numerous daimyo who controlled various regions within Japan, and under daimyos you had samurai who were the lower level of that aristocratic warrior class. And so collectively, they were responsible for the defense of Japan, and they all fell under the leadership of the shogun. Um, the last shogun of Japan was the Tokugawa shogun. He was defeated in the Boshin War by the Meiji Emperor's forces. And then this transition from Japan being ruled by the samurai and the shogun to what we know as the imperial era of Japan. So that started Imperial Japan. So what's interesting about the Imperial Japanese era is when Japan was ruled by the shogun and the samurai, they were for a long time known as a hermit kingdom. They were kind of cut off from the outside world. They were apprehensive of new technologies and modern ways of living. But when the emperor seized control after 1868, after the Boshin War, Japan rapidly militarized. They rapidly advanced. They started adopting ways of living and technology that resembled a lot of what was going on in like Western Europe and in America. Um, so that with the rapid militarization of Japan, they also started to invade many countries within the Asia Pacific region, like China and Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, as demonstrated on the map to the left. That's the extent of the Japanese Empire. They defeated the Chinese in the Sino-Japanese War in 1894 to 1895, defeated the Russians in the Russo-Japanese War 1904 to 1905. 5 million Japanese served during World War II, so this was the height of the Imperial Japanese Army. So it was a pretty large army even by today's standards. And then in 1945, when the Imperial Japanese Army and the Empire of Japan was defeated by the Allies, they were forced to basically disband the army and get rid of the Japanese Empire being the dictator or sole ruler of Japan. Following World War II, Japan was occupied by Allied forces led by the United States. They were occupied from 1945 to 1952. And during the course of this occupation, the United States basically needed to restructure the whole Japanese government and transition it to resemble the United States or other like Western European countries, democratic countries. So part of that was the U.S. rewrote or wrote a Japanese constitution, and in that constitution they included Article 9, which specifically prohibited Japan from waging war or having a military, especially a military with any sort of offensive capabilities. So, when the occupation of Japan ended in 1952, this is, during the Cold War era between the United States, Soviet Union. So tensions were really high during this era. So Japan recognized, being that it was in pretty close proximity to Russia, and they've had issues with Russia in the past, they recognized that they needed some sort of military defense force. So this is when Japan's self-defense force was established. So it was formally established in 1954. It's composed of ground, maritime, and air forces, just like many other militaries in the world. And currently, the Defense Forces has approximately 230 to 247,000 active duty service members. So It's not a huge military. Like I said, Article 9 prohibits them from having a fully like capable offensive military. But they are a pretty technologically advanced military because they get most of their equipment and gear, and they get a lot of military advisement from the United States. So while they are a smaller military, they are, advanced by today's standards. So in recent years, due to rising tensions with China and North Korea and also Russia, Japan has sought to build up its military and increase its military spending while also making its military more offensive, being more capable of doing offensive operations. In 2023, Japan committed to increasing its military spending to 2% of its gross domestic product. This is a big deal because historically Japan, while they did have a military budget, it was historically very small. And so this would see a 60% increase in military spending in the next 5 years. The United States and other allied countries have welcomed this military buildup. They supported it, which is ironic given that the U.S. and allies wrote the Japanese constitution that prohibited them from having a military, but they are supported by the United States and other allied nations. Um, and public support for increasing Japan's military offense capabilities and building up the military has grown in recent years, especially with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A lot of the Japanese public see the utility and see the need for having a more capable military, so it's not as controversial as you would think. And then in August of 2023, something big happened at Camp David here in the United States, which is Japan, South Korea, and the United States entered a trilateral pact known as JARCUS, which basically commits the three nations to be military allies. And if it's not as explicit as, a NATO treaty, which says, an attack on one is attack on all, but basically it commits the countries to if one country is attacked, they basically get together and discuss what their next move is going to be together collectively. It also commits them to increasing their joint military exercises. This is also a pretty big deal given the history between Korea and Japan, and Japan occupying Korea for a number of years during the Imperial Japanese Age. So it's a pretty big deal that this happened in 2023. So while Japan has committed to this reinvestment and rebuilding its military, and they've committed to increasing the military budget, one of the issues that they're running into is military recruitment. A lot of young people just don't have any connections to the military since their Japan really hasn't had a military or been in a military conflict since World War II. So a lot of young people don't have any connection to the military. They don't really know much about it. They just don't have a strong desire to join the military. And also another factor is Japan's population crisis. So we all know that Japan is in the midst of a population crisis. They're not having a lot of kids, and they have a rapidly aging population, so it makes the pool of younger recruits smaller. So Japan has actually tried to reach out and recruit older recruits, and also increase the number of women that it recruits into the military. And they also want to, or they have wanted to in recent years, revise the Japanese constitution to basically get rid of Article 9 or change Article 9. It's pretty hard. They need 2/3 majority vote to do this, and they've done a lot of public polling on if people would support a revision to the Japanese Constitution, and it's basically 50-50 split, which is a good indication that maybe if it continues to trend upward and gain more support, especially as tensions rise in the region, that we could possibly see a revision of the Japanese Constitution specifically relating to Article 9. So, concluding this topic, some big takeaways are Japan's security threats in the region have increased both public and government support for rebuilding the Japanese military. This is also supported by many allied nations like the United States, South Korea, and NATO countries. And one of the biggest hindrances to Japan's military buildup or the remilitarization of Japan is its recruitment issues with recruiting enough people for the military. Japan has increased joint military exercises with allies as threats from China, Russia, and South Korea increase. Like discussed earlier in this presentation, the trilateral agreement, JARCIS, with the U.S., South Korea, and Japan is a pretty big deal. And another big takeaway, perhaps biggest takeaway, is Japan could potentially see a revision of their constitution in the future that allows them to have a fully capable offensive military if they're able to repeal Article 9.